All right. Well, good evening, educators. Thank you for tuning in this evening and welcome back to another monthly Facebook Live with Belong, Be, Become, Wellbeing for Educators. Very excited for this evening's topic, which is why educators need to play. Very excited to talk about this because this is, a huge passion of mine personally. This evening, we've got Rod Soper joining us. Rod has over 20 years experience in the field of education as a teacher and head of school. Currently, Rod heads up Thinkers Inc. and is the principal advisor with Thinkers Inc. Consulting. He is also the chief investigator of the Playing with Gratitude research project, as well as an author, speaker, and leadership coach. Welcome to you, Rod, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yay, pleasure. So I think it might be a great idea to just tell all our viewers a little bit more about yourself and I guess your journey in early childhood education and what brought you to this point in your life now.
Very good. Well, I started my teaching career back when I was about 25, I think, and I started teaching kindy, first year primary school, taught in that space for about 10 years, and that was lots of fun. Well, great mutual admiration society back there. And then after that, I moved into some older years in primary school, and then I became the principal of a school. I enjoyed doing that for a few years. While I was principal, I also did some postgraduate degree work in psychology. And then while I was also principal, the school that I had a preschool or an early childhood centre attached to it. So I then expanded my focus to the primaries as well as the early years. And then from there, that was a long time ago now. From there, I have basically been working in the early childhood space for a little while as a consultant. I left the school, decided to travel around, talk about all sorts of things to do with education, with leadership, with creative thinking, and also a lot to do with planning, programming, things like that, particularly quality area number one. And then I realized that I was doing a lot of talking about education, but not doing it. So I sold my house and started Thinkers Inc. preschool. So we have it's a long day preschool in Sydney. I have about 70 odd preschoolers that hang out with me every day with my team. And then a little bit, I do a bit of consulting still on the side where I can honestly say that I practice what I preach. So it's a real thing. It's real live reflections and those sorts of things. So yeah, we have a great community. It's lots of fun. And and we have, I was there today hanging out with the guys. And then we have enjoy doing some consulting on the side. So one of the things you mentioned was the Playing with Gratitude project, which is a very special project. It's got about 30 early childhood services involved now across Australia. Over 4,000 children, families and teachers are playing with gratitude. So they're all working, building their wellbeing around with connecting their understanding of play along with their understanding of gratitude, and then hanging their thinking and their expression and their daily practice around that frame. And we're using the action research methodology to help understand each individual play space and the children and the families that are there. And then from there, we then build in the action of play and gratitude, and then we start to understand what's the influence. So yeah, it's pretty good.
I love that. I love playing with gratitude. What a beautiful way to kind of like consolidate this idea of like playfulness and
Yeah.
then also like thankfulness. Do the
Yes.
children respond well to that? Like, do they understand?
Yeah, it's been such a delightful journey. When we first started the project back in 2017, we started with 9 people who were involved in the project, and excuse me, we didn't really know how it would ultimately change children, although and their teachers and their families. Although we'd done bucket loads of research from amazing researchers who've dedicated their lives to understand gratitude. We understood that it changes how you feel about yourself, your sense of isolation, anxiety. It changes your blood pressure. But the thing that was really the most important was that it changes our white blood cell count and it improves our immunity. And there is scientific peer-reviewed proof around that. So it's not just someone's nice, oh, Lana, this is a good idea. It's actually, it's got years and years of research that sits behind it. And so I think we knew that this wellness piece was going to start to flourish because that is the nature of gratitude. It doesn't matter your age, gender, where you're from, your socioeconomic background, doesn't matter. If you practice it, it makes a difference. So we knew that was going to, it was going to work, but we didn't know what the expression was going to be. And the children, of course, just, they just thrived and flourished. We have so many amazing families, stories from families who come back and their whole family unit has changed as a result of it. The way in which parents perceive their children because of the way in which they grasp this concept of gratitude and were able to verbalize it down to, as young as 3. And then those children that didn't have any language, they had what we have ended up calling things called gratitude gestures. And so the more that we practiced gratitude and played with gratitude in their play space, the way they physically responded to their teachers and educators was remarkably different. And it's happened in all 30 early learning sessions, and it's just remarkable. So and it's not preempted. We don't say anything. It's just place after place recognizes that this gratitude, the way the children snuggle in, how they settle, how they go to sleep, it's just amazing. So it's pretty powerful stuff when it comes to the wellbeing piece. That's the gratitude. And the reason we've put it, that's good England, isn't it? Good English. The reason why we coupled it with play was because we also were understanding and researching what's the influence of play across our lifespan. And it starts from birth and it goes all the way through to death. So we were sort of trying to understand how do we what's the vessel in which we offer this abstract concept of gratitude into a play environment such as a preschool or a toddler room or a baby's nursery setting. So we used this notion of play. So we looked at that, and that took quite some time to understand it, because play is a very, very complex thing. And so we jumped into a bunch of research and found some really, really amazing stuff out there that is just not taught in any of our degrees or any of our diplomas or certificates. And certainly I've done a number of degrees and none of my lecturers talked about it. I went back to my university dean of education and I said, so tell me about the influence of play across the lifespan. And she just looked at me blankly. And I said, well, now that we're here, let me tell you. So I produced all this research and I handed it over to her and I said, I didn't know this and clearly you didn't know it, but I want you to share it with your students because this is it's changed me as a person, it's changed me as a teacher, and now it's changing families and children around the country. So, and it's all to do with well-being. So important. So it's pretty special.
Well,
project.
yeah, I think that's such a good point. There's so many things. I mean, university's great. I learned a whole lot from uni, and I probably wouldn't be the teacher I am now, without having studied. But
Yeah.
there are some really like practical things like play, like this notion of play. Okay, yeah, we associate it so much with the child's job or the child's work.
Mhm.
But yeah, okay. So first question, what does play look like for an adult? What does it mean?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I love the fact that you highlighted that idea of play being possibly a child's work. When in actual fact, the research that's been done, particularly by a wonderful researcher, he's a doctor and a psychiatrist, and his name is Stuart Brown, and he's written this most delightful book called Play, funnily enough. But you should, and anybody who's out there in Facebook land, if you want something really interesting to read, grab it. Stuart Brown, and his book's called Play, and he writes just so beautifully, it's just easy to
Playfully?
read. Hmm? Was that?
Rats playfully?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly right. And it's just such a delight to, because sometimes you get research stuff and you're like, oh, this is going to be a hard one to get through, but it's just like that. But he talks about, through his research that he's done, and he works and heads up the Institute of Play in America. And he said that in actual fact, this notion of the opposite to play being work is a very common one, but the actual opposite to play is depression. So when you don't play,
Cool.
you are depressed. There's all sorts of anecdotal research around that, but he's also got lots and lots of medical and qualitative and quantitative research to demonstrate how we are physically different. And it's very interesting, this notion of play. Our bodies, and particularly our brains, are fundamentally different. They actually don't form properly in the absence of play. And it's so he uses it as the example or the statement that play we have a birthright to play, and it actually has that place within us, like eating and drinking, and play should be treated, therefore the absence of play should be treated as malnutrition. Now, if you've ever done any research around, or you know much about malnutrition, it's a hugely complex thing where your whole body, every organ, including your skin, is terribly impacted by malnutrition. And his research has proven that we have the same types of deficit without play. So play is really, there's a range of definitions, and it's very curious. One thing I did learn is that no play researcher can agree on what play is defined as. I'm like, oh, come on. Anyway, so that's a tough one for us. But really, it's that I think that out of all the stuff that I researched, it's that joy and delight, that emotion of the joy and delight that provides motion or movement in our life. So that's really what play is. So a catchy way of saying it is, it's the emotion that provides the motion, if that makes sense. So it's the joy and delight, it's the pleasure, it's the anticipation and surprise that, as a result of that, turns us into moving forward, whether it's well-being, a sense of self, a sense of place, a sense of agency, a sense of connectedness, sense of relationship. And so when we have this emotion that provides the motion, then all those wonderful things fall into place. Our brain develops, our heart develops, once you've got your brain developing properly, then all your organs are, becoming, because your brain says go for it. So as an adult, one of the best ways that I help people to understand that, and this is not my work at all, it's Stuart Brown has a under his tutelage, I've learned this. But if you think back and you think about those earliest memories, and it's not about age, it's just your earliest ones, whatever comes. I was about 7. That was as far back as I could go. Other people can go way earlier, and other people stop at 14. Do you know what I mean? So it's those earliest memories of joy and delight. What are the memories of what you're doing? And I think one of the best, my personal example was that we grew up in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, and our home backed onto the national park. And we had these wonderful banksia grove at the back of our house. And my sister and I would stand at the banksia grove, and we would look at each other, and we would imagine what play we would go into as we, went into the banksia trees. And there was all these paths underneath the trees. It was a bit magical, magic wishing tree type stuff. And but the thing was that wasn't the joy and the delight for me, although I did enjoy it. Was fun. The thing that was the most joy and the most delight for me was my sister and I standing on the edge of the banksia grove and talking about what was about to occur. It was that incredible anticipation. And even telling the story now, I can still feel the shivers and the tingle, because it was so powerful for me. And I can tell you nearly every scenario because it was just so amazing. And now in my adult life, the times when I play are the times when that anticipation, that shiver, that excitement of something unknown.
Yes, the wonder. It's the wonder.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you know me, I'm not someone to take a lot of risk. I'm not a big risk taker. However, the most delightful times in my life, that are the times when I would say I'm playing the most, is when I take that risk and stand on the edge of the banksia grove, if you like, of my mind, and go, right, what am I about to jump into? And that's the time, and I am the most charged, I'm the most energized, I'm the happiest, I'm the chattiest, I'm I've got oodles of patience, I'm full of delight, I've got so much excitement in my life. It's there, and because that's me playing. Now one of the examples was starting the preschool. That was like me standing on the edge of the banksia grove, and we were going to create a preschool, but instead of imagining, we did. And that was pretty special times. The playing with gratitude thing was, the project was exactly the same. We knew what we wanted to do, in the sense we wanted to create something that would change people's lives, but we didn't know how it was going to eventuate. And we created it together, and now it's as strong as it is, and it keeps growing. Every month I get another email. Hi, Rod. Done the playing with gratitude on the ECA website. Can you help us do it in our place? So I think for adults,
so great.
if you can just go back and find that first joy and delight, and think about what that was, and then think about, are you bringing that into your adulthood?
And what actually stimulates that? Like, I think that's what we need to actually reflect on. I think since I've moved locations, I've started to realize the things I'm unconsciously drawn to. Like, I'm quite a sporty person, and I think, I really want to try surfing, or I've got this real urge to like go for a run on the beach, or I've always loved doing gymnastics when I was younger, but then as you get older, you start to think that you can't do those fun things anymore. And not saying that everybody likes to do that. I've always been like an active person and a really playful person, but from everything you've just said, from it being basically even a skill for survival, if you're saying that it's malnutrition if we don't have play, sounds like it's actually a survival tool.
Well, it is, and I think this is different. What you pointed out is so important. So we find the joy, the delight, we find that wonder of the emotion, and we bring it into our adult life. And then what we do is that then becomes a key piece of of survival and well-being for us to navigate the stresses of life. Because, you know, when I look back at my my journey, even through the pandemic, with the constant changing parameters around, you know, early childhood and what does it mean and what doesn't. And I think the thing that sustained me was that knowledge of how important it was still to play. It was still important for me to find how I was going to play. And the way I play is different to the way you play, because I'm not sporty.
Can I
So
ask you
you'll
how
never.
you play, Rod? What's play to you?
Well, I think first of all, it's definitely doing something that's full of anticipation that I've never done. Like that's the one big one. And I think the other one that's very important to me is being with people that I call that I have a circle of five, and those circle of five are the people that I invest very, very deeply into. And when I'm hanging out with those five people, those and it doesn't matter what we're doing, it's just being together, and that for me brings so much pleasure, so much delight, and so much joy that that's when I'm playing. And I mean, I could be sitting down helping, you know, my best friend who has a couple of kids, helping them do their homework, and people go, how is that playing? I'm like, but I'm with my circle of five. And there is so much pleasure for me in that. That for me is actually playing. It's about the togetherness, and what that offers to me is just that's playing. I mean, obviously we also do a bunch of other crazy things as well, but play doesn't have to be something that's, oh, you know, I've got to go out or I've got to be at home and I've just got to be doing nothing. No. It's about what's happening for you internally, what's happening to your amygdala, you know, what's happening to your oxytocin and your serotonin. They're the ones that you want. You don't want the endorphins and the, you know, the other one will come to me in a minute. Those hormones, you don't want those ones because they're the selfish ones. You know, you want the oxytocin and serotonin because they're the things that bring you life, and bring you, you know, the pleasure of wholeness, and that's what playing does. So it's not necessarily about a thing, although it's often brought alive through a practical experience.
What I'm getting from you is like the safety to be present. Like you feel safe enough to be present in what you're doing, and that's what's bringing you joy.
That's right. It absolutely can be that. Yes, you're 100%. Yeah. And for some people who are very introverted, you know, they might say to you, you know, one of my most delightful things is when I'm lost in a story. And they've got this world of imagination, and there's so much pleasure in that. And for others, like, oh gosh, I couldn't think of anything worse reading a book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm so not that person. I'm like, well, but it's fine to not be that person. But for that person that does have that the play and the delight in the book, then you want them to be reading, because that's what will make them well.
Yes, exactly. And it's the mindset. So I think I'm trying to think of a practical way for people to understand what play means to them. I guess it's what evokes that joy, you know. I think when we're adulting, we actually forget so much of those things that bring us into a space of presence and joy and I don't know, just living our lives. So what would you suggest to people? Like, would you get them to reflect on, like you said, that earliest memory of when you first felt joy?
It's a very powerful thing to do, because what happens is, the reason why you want to go back to the first one is because often it's so memorable. Does that make sense? It's quite powerful, and I think then you go, well, it was such a lovely, wonderful, joyful time, but what else is sitting there alongside the joy? Like for me, it was the anticipation. For my partner, it was knowing that he was about to create something, and that was the thing, and now he is CEO of an events company, because that's what he does now. And he's just like, he just smashes it, because he's playing in that incredible delight when he creates something for somebody else. And it
in his element.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, obviously now his budget back then was a truck that he was given, and it was mud. Now he has, hundreds of thousands of dollars from corporate clients, so it's a different budget, but at the heart of it, for him, it's exactly the same. And so he's doing that thing. And so you think back, and I mean, one of the fun things that often I do with people when we're exploring this is just get a piece of paper, write down play in the middle, and just do a bit of a mind map, if you're a bit of a visual learner, and just start writing things down, and it might trigger your memory for something else, and you might trigger your memory for something else, and then finally, oh, that's it, I remember, oh my gosh, it doesn't necessarily, for some people it comes like that, and then for others, like for me, it took me about probably a week just to keep thinking, because I just had that sense, oh, that was good, but I don't know if it was that, and then I don't know if that was really the biggest thing for me. And then I kept thinking and thinking, and then finally I landed on that experience of being on the edge. And it was so funny. I thought, oh gosh, I haven't thought about that for such a long time. And then I started to reflect on how that had come into my adulthood, and the times when I was most happy was when play was being expressed in me.
And I suppose that's something, so I'm getting this image of you with your sister under the banksia tree, and of course, like, I'm thinking of my children at the preschool too, that they don't have this like awakened mind that we have, that prevents them from being in this different world. And I guess I totally agree with you when you say that it's definitely like there is kind of a disconnect between body and mind when it comes to play, because we're so logical and pragmatic a lot of the time that the body's kind of shut down. Like, we're actually, it is like we're not listening to it. We're not even aware of the things we're actually drawn to anymore, because we're not present. We're thinking of the things we have to do, the things we should be worrying about, the things we can't control. So I think there is so much to be learnt if you just watch what children do, and how, of course, they're not totally independent. We can't let them do everything, because some things are dangerous and not quite safe. But the anticipation is more wonder than worry or stress, right? Kind of like, I wonder what
it's a great thing to wonder about. So there's a wonderful researcher by the name of John Eberly, and his research has come up with a bit of a model. I don't mind a model myself, helps me to understand things. There's 6 things. So it's surprise and anticipation, it's understanding and strength, and then, it's 5 things, sorry, and then the last one is poise. And that's how he defines the 5 pillars of play. And I think the first ones of the anticipation and surprise, that's just the woohoo, in the preschool, one of the ways in which, one of the things that's a little bit fun that we do every now and then is I'll often bring a bag in that they can't see into, and it's new. And they go, Rod, what's in the bag? Oh, I wonder what's in the bag. And we have a bit of a carry on about this bag. So it's this surprise of the anticipation of what's in the bag. Now, most of the time, the bag's just got my lunch in it, but it's about this thing that we create together, this surprise and the anticipation. And then, of course, they find out what's in it, and then we talk about what I'm having for lunch and why I've chosen that. But one of the things that and the reason why that you reminded me of that was because we missed the point of, because we're so busy. And I think that this last point is around poise, is one of those big pieces that, if you like, it's the bow around the present. It's the thing that really just gives it that absolute delight, is this notion of poise. And the easiest example for anybody in and around children is, when a little toddler well, they're not quite a toddler because they haven't stopped walking yet, but they're babies starting to crawl, and then they get up on their their 2 feet, and we're all like, yes, go for it, you know? And they're like, okay, I can do it. And then finally they take their steps, and we're all just like, champion. That's poise, where the child is so full of themselves in a delightful way, they get heady and fall over. But they're so excited and so full of our joy and pleasure in them that they actually end up then getting up and walk again. Now, if you stop that thought for a second and you actually look into what it mechanically requires for a person to walk, it's one of the biggest and most complex things that we ever do. So just that poise, that celebration in that moment of them, that's poise. That's where they get up and they do it again and they do it again. And then, of course, next thing you know, off they're running and having the world's their oyster. But I think one of the things that we have in life, and certainly in many early learning spaces, is we don't create opportunities for poise to have its place, because it's like, oh, good job, I love that, don't forget to clean up. Or good job, that's awesome, come on, we've got to go and do this, it's got to be lunch. Now, it's a tough one. I experience it every day because, you know, we've got to feed them, we've got to make sure that they're cared for and they're right, and we move from this activity to this. But it's that moment where they're looking at you and their eyes are full of just how much pleasure has been brought to them by the experience. And do we catch it? And often we don't, because we're busy. And I think one of the things in play is that seemingly important, seemingly pointless thing that brings us so much pleasure. And that's what poise captures. And I just really love that. And I constantly encouraging my team to look for poise. Look for that point in the play where they'll look up at you, or they'll stand back and you can see them going, yep, I just rocked that, whatever it was. And that in itself is, as you let them that sink in and saturate their bodies and their minds. And then once that occurs, they'll look up and look around to see, who can I celebrate this pleasure with? And if you're there,
who can delight in my joy with me?
Yes. And then if you're there and you get to celebrate that, and that's a very powerful thing. You know, and it's no wonder when we catch it that the child more often than not will launch themselves at us and in a hug, because you've just celebrated in that most meaningful moment in their day. And I think that's another well-being piece of play, you know. And I mean, we still have that as adults. I'm talking about children, but let's forget labels, and it's called human, called personhood from birth to death. You know, we all love that. So I think that real busyness is a huge problem around play. But
I do think my next question to you was going to actually be, sorry to cut you off, but you know, why do educators need to play? But I think that's, I didn't realize the talk would kind of go in this direction where you know, we need to so much delight in each other's joy and kind of celebrate our play together. It's kind of becoming this collective thing. If educators actually did take the time to understand what is play to them, then we can be more attuned to when it's appropriate to stop the play for children, you know, because I know I'm still working in early childhood. I know that we've got so much responsibility. Like you said, the children need to be fed, toileted, transitioned. There needs to be teacher-led activities. There needs to be appropriate time for inside and outside play. But is the world going to fall apart if you let them have 10 more minutes in an activity that is just making their eyes like just sparkle with wonder? Can we capture those moments because we've actually allowed ourselves to realize again what play means? Like we're just too shut off to it to realize anymore, you know?
Well, I think one of the really interesting pieces of research that I'm sure most people will have heard about is this notion of flow. Have you heard of flow? Not as in flow your aunt, but flow as in the river. And it was first put together by, or kind of, I guess, verbalized by a Polish child psychologist called Csikszentmihalyi, and
Mhm.
he talked in the 70s, and he talked about this notion that flow steps out, or when you're in flow, you step outside of time and space. And we've all experienced it when we'll have been doing something and then we go, oh my gosh, like we come back into time and space. And we go, oh my gosh, look at the time. Everything is just like, I've been doing this for 3 or 4 hours or whatever.
Presence. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's called flow. And often we see it, or we can see it in our learning spaces and our play spaces, but it takes about 10 to 20 minutes to actually drop down into flow. So in our busy learning and play environments, how do we allow for flow to have its place? Now, if we know that it brings the left and the right side of the brain together, it changes, it does the wonderful release of all those good hormones. It allows if you're into flow, we know your amygdala is feeling safe and secure. They've got a safe base and place to be working from, which means your limbic system and your cortex is all, and your prefrontal cortex and your executive functioning, it's all working in a exactly the way it's designed to. And so for us then to not be worrying about people or places, or there's no fear, there's no distractions, I'm just in the moment. It's of course delightful once you have it, and one of the telltale signs that you can observe is you'll get the humming, absent-minded humming, you'll get the absent-minded chatter, and often completely disregard the people and things that are going around them. So there might be like a full-on, stuck in the mud game happening right beside them, but they're in this moment and it's like as if nothing else is around them. So it's a real challenge, I think, in early learning and certainly also in schools. How do we allow flow to have its place? Because we know how important it is. It totally changes how we see ourselves, how we see the experience that we're in, our abilities, all those sorts of stuff, that self-perception, that sense of agency, it's all influenced quite dramatically and remarkably. So, but then how do we get on with the busyness of the day if it takes 10, 20 minutes to allow children to at least have that room? So it's a constant struggle, but it's one that I always encourage people to wrestle with, because it's so worth it.
Absolutely. What just came to mind then was that, if the teachers need teachers, we actually need people to remind us of all these ways if we're going to promote flow for children, do we know what it means? Do we practice it?
That's
Who's
right.
teaching us?
Yeah.
We can't educate these children if we don't have these tools ourselves. So
yeah, that's right. And I just love the fact that you're running these sessions. I mean, and I've got mentors in my life to help me to constantly learn and grow and discover this stuff for myself and then for my team. And then obviously part of the reason I do the consulting thing is because I don't want to just sit on it. I'm like, right, come on, let's get it out there. It should make a difference because it's so important. And every child deserves to have play flourish in their lives.
Absolutely.
And more than just just the incidental stuff. I mean, there's no criticism, but I always think back to the word intentionality that comes from the early learning framework, and it's defined as purposeful, thoughtful, and deliberate. If we don't go in with that real understanding of where these things come from and the importance of them, we don't end up, if we're not thoughtful about them, we don't end up being deliberate because we don't give it the importance. And I think that's what's in my life. It's not until I learn something I go, oh my gosh, I need to make room for this in my curriculum. I need to make room for this in my professional thinking. I need to make room for this in my personal life. because I've been intentional in my learning. So it's just one of those things where we just got to keep learning, right?
Exactly. And this is what I think makes you great at what you do, Rod, is because you are very true to your word. You practice what you preach. And as teachers of the future generation, I actually think we do have a responsibility to make sure that we're still growing, because
Yes.
everything we do, say, and articulate to children is exactly like, it's just a projection of who we are. So if we're not doing any work on this one, it's they deserve teachers that are doing their own work, so they can get the best outcomes.
That's right. And I think one of the things that I've learned as a teacher myself, and as a leader, and as a human, is that if I want to be able to give the best version of myself to myself, then that's a piece of work in it, and I've got to be mindful and have some intentionality around that. And I think then when I'm the best version that I can be, then the way in which I interact with others, whether it's my team, whether it's my family, whether it's my partner, whether it's my children, doesn't matter, right? Because I'm giving them the best version of me. And I think that's the mantle that we have in education, whatever level, is, well, how are you helping to improve the people's lives that you're with in order for them to thrive and to flourish beyond you?
Yes.
And if you're anything like me, 30 years
I agree
later,
with that.
they're coming back. Full circle. I had one student.
Full circle.
Yeah, I had one student knock on my door at work, and I turned around and I looked, and I was like, "There's a young man standing there, but I've seen those eyes before." And I opened the door, and he goes, "Do you remember me?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." And the last time I saw him was 20 years ago, when he was 4, and he'd hunted me down to tell me a message. It was lovely. But it's
what was the message?
The message was, because of what you did for me, I've changed my life to go and help others. And I was like,
oh my God.
Yeah. I was like, that's a big call. And he said, well, I was chatting with my mum, and
that's like gold medal educator.
No, thank you. And he said, yeah, this is what we came up with. So I was like,
wow, how beautiful. Gosh, did you cry?
I said, can I give you a hug?
Yeah. Oh,
so it's very special. But I think
so glad he did that.
Yeah, I mean, it's our alumni, right? I think I've worked out that there's been thousands of children that have come across my path, or thousands of people, whatever age, have come across my path. And how do I present myself? Did they get the best version of me? Many of them did. Some of them did, because I think I wasn't either in a good place myself, but
that's life, though, isn't it?
100%. That's right.
Just keeps going. I just wanted to read some comments that we've had, Rod, during our sesh. Sally said, if we could just stop and be instead of always doing, we could discover play and what gives us joy. Listen to ourselves.
Yeah. And Sally, if you're still there, I really recommend that you just fight for that, with all your heart, to find that time to slow down.
Thank you, Sally. We've also got Anne, who said, doing things like this, learning, gives me a sense of joy, excitement, and energy. Yeah. It's a form of play for me because I am enjoying it.
Yeah.
Just said, flow, a delicious space where I forget about time. How do educators get into flow with our children when there are so many pressures on us? That's a good question. Don't know if we can always be in flow at work.
Yeah, but you know what? I think it comes back to this, what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where it was talking about who our community, so our community of teachers, so our colleagues, and actually bringing the importance and the context and the environment of an understanding of flow professionally. One of the things that we did with gratitude was, a lot of people were like, oh, gratitude's not that big a thing. So what we did was, rather than trying to go, oh, got to go and teach gratitude now, what we did was we said, just go and play with gratitude yourself. Just go and find 3 things a day, a person, a place, or a thing that you're grateful for, and let it do its thing in you first and see how it changes you. And it absolutely did. That's the delightful thing about it. And I would then apply it to that same principle, is to actually, when you talk about it with your team and understand it, then the next step is, okay, let's just have some time to see if we can find a single place in a week where flow might be able to have its place. And then just start with a conversation around that, how delightful it was, what a pleasure it was. Did it make a difference that we feel that it should have? It then has the place of importance begins. And then from there, it then people will move things aside to get into it because it matters. And let's face it, in our lives, whether they're busy or not, we invest time in what matters. We absolutely do. And they always say that actions speak louder than words. Well, it's true, because if you really want to, if you're really into group time, guess what? You'll be spending time hunting down and creating group time. If you're an artist and you love art, you're not going to be going, oh, let's go outside and teach the kids some fundamental movement skills. You're going to be saying, let's go and do some more art, guys, because I love it. It matters to you. Yeah. So if we understand and we've experienced how flow can become, and that type of play can have its place, and we can see how important it is, then it starts to matter to us, and then things move out of the way, and it's lovely. Yeah, and it does work. Doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen.
Yes. I love that. I love everything you're saying. I think it's so, it's something we really need to hear. That's why I was so excited about this particular live, because we're just in our heads so much, aren't we?
Yeah.
So much of the time, even when we are with children. I think most of us are drawn to this profession because we are connected with the inner child, the child within that we all have. But it is still a job. It is still you carry a lot of responsibility as an educator, and you can kind of see how the fun slips away when it becomes about documentation, and you got pressures from society and parents and the system and all the rest of it. But just having a bit of an awareness about this stuff is great. Bridget's just said, I think we can. So this is in regards to the flow state when we're in the early childhood context. I think we can if we work well together with co-educators and teachers to make it happen, and happen for you too.
Yes.
Yeah. So everything you're saying too, community, collaboration, delighting in each other's joys.
Yeah. And I think one of the best things that you can do around play, and just getting it, allowing it to have a bit of energy in your play, in your early learning space, is to ask that question. What brought you great joy this weekend? And if people go, nothing, then you can say, okay, well, what was the last thing that brought you great joy or happiness? And look, there's definitely people out there that will go, well, I can't remember. And that's where my recommendation is to sit with them and try and help them to just track back, because we all need that. And then say, how can we include that play that you were doing at that point and bring it into the present? So I think then you become an incredible blessing to your colleagues by doing that. But even just sharing the things that bring you great pleasure and delight, it feels very normal to do that to people that get on with, but sometimes our work colleagues, we don't necessarily do that. Sometimes we do, but go and have lunch with someone that you haven't connected with for a while and ask them that question. What was the last thing that brought you the most joy and happiness? And if they go, where'd that question come from? So, I did some PD last night, and this weird dude was talking about it, and I just really, it's curious. It's got me going.
Yeah, but what a great conversation starter, rather than, oh, what do you do for work, or would you? How are you? Yeah, good. No,
imagine starting that with parents. What brought you great joy today?
Yeah. And I actually wanted to say this before I forgot. So I used to have a journal, and I did the things that I was grateful for every night before I went to bed. And you have practices in your life and you're really good at them for a while, and then you go, oh, I can't be bothered, or it's too hard or whatever. So this year I downloaded an app called 1 Second Every Day. And it is exactly what it says, that you record 1 second of your day, and at the end of the year it mashes it all together. And what I've noticed this has done for me is to actually look for something every day that's special or exciting. And I'm actually physically creating those moments. So without even being aware of what you're talking about, I was doing it. Like, took a 1 second of my dog sitting in the sun today, and that brought me joy. I wanted to remember that 1 second.
I love that. So what's the app called? 1 Second?
Yeah, 1 second every day, and it's just 1SE, I think it's called. And I'm so excited to mash it together and at the end of the year, because I've just, it's awesome.
That's a good one.
So I'd recommend that.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
definitely
great.
Start working on that.
Just seeing if we've got any more. No, I don't think we have any more comments. But is there anything else you'd like to say, Rod, before we wrap it up? Is there any, I guess you've said so much, like there's been so much wisdom and insight into this whole idea of play, but any like last words that you really want people to hear?
My biggest encouragement is that is just to have a go. Don't be worried about trying to remember the earliest memories. Don't worry about that. Just have a conversation or mind map it out. Talk to someone that's significant enough to you that they will join in the conversation with meaning. And just have let the joy and delight of these memories bubble up from within you, and let them do their thing. But don't stop there. I think the next thing that you want to do is say, how can I bring that action that brought so much joy and delight into my adulthood? And you can certainly do that and model that at work with the children, because I think that's incredibly important. But then, look for ways to bring it alive in your adult life. And that will bring so much healing and so much wellness to you as a person, not as a partner or a single or as a teacher or as the administrator. None of that. It just simply comes to the heart of who you are as a person. And I think the more that you can invest in that piece of play for yourself and find out what it looks like for you personally, it will just, as I said, it will be life-changing, and it will heal you. And if you want to add in a little piece of gratitude around it, then just look for the person, the place, and the thing, just 3 things each day. And while you're playing, and it will honestly, your sense of self, your sense of how you're being, your sense of being, your becoming as a result, how you become as a result of that being, that sense of place and agency, will be transformative. And I love that word. It sounds a little bit, catchphrasey, but I love that word because that word, it talks about the changing, or the changing of the form. And you want your form to be changed, how your mind's being formed or how it's currently forming. You want that to be changed, and you want the thing that is going to bring you health and wholeness and life and that sense of wonder to be the change agent. Don't let a pandemic or a negative piece of life, they always come, whether it's broken relationships or it's a tough time at work. Play and certainly gratitude can totally shift those two things for you. And I think that's delightful. I have a Facebook group, if you're keen, Beans. Not that I like to advertise it, but I think it's a good one because I invest in it every day. It's called Wellbeing Ideas for Children. And the whole thing is, how do we look at life for children, but there's so much stuff that you can apply to yourself. So, when it's in there about, a month of joy for children, don't worry about the children, do it for yourself.
Yeah.
But then you can go to it for the children too. But it's a great Facebook, a great Facebook group, and every day I post something that I, through my experience or research, I really think is valuable, and hopefully it will help you. But that's sort of an ongoing thing. But yeah, the big thing is find out how to play as an adult, and it will help you to flourish too.
Thank you, Rod. Beautiful words.
Worries.
And could you just say who was the author of that book, Play?
Oh, Stuart Brown, Stuart, Stuart Brown, and his Play, beautiful, really good. And if you're not into reading, which some people aren't, he's also done a bunch of TED Talks.
Great.
As well. So you can Google him. He's done some other videos as well. You'll hear some of his research that I've talked about tonight. He'll they're presented there as well. So you can make sure you can fact check. Those sorts of things. And honestly, some of the stories he tells you, your head, it will just blow up. When I was listening to him, I was like this. My mouth is wide open. So.
Oh, I love that. Okay, definitely going to look him up.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Rod, thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure you've inspired a lot of us that have tuned in. You've certainly inspired me. I really, really am keen to read this book because, just this idea of play has just been a huge thing for me in my early 30s now. Refusing to grow up, but also want to do my best for the children before me as well. So I feel like, something that's really going to not only improve who I am on a personal level, but on a professional level too. So
awesome.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. Please follow Rod. What was the Facebook page again? Say it.
Wellbeing Ideas for Children. And then the other one, if you want to, is the Playing with Gratitude Project. That's on Facebook and on Insta as well. So, or you can just go to the website, whatever you like.
Great.
Lots of ideas there too.
Yes, I'll put it in the comments just in case anyone missed that. All right. Well, have fun playing for the rest of the week, Rod.
Yes, and you too.
Yeah, thank you so much again, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.
Have a nice evening. Bye.
All right. See you.
Thank you, everyone.